Back in the day, you used to get something called the weekly news, which was what's happening around the country. And this one is 1953, and they do a story about Sir Edmund Hillary conquering Everest. And so if we have a look through this, they've got ads, they've got all sorts of things. They've also got a picture of the Queen, who came in 1953 and visited a lot of towns throughout the country, and here's a bit about Sir Edmund Hillary. Wow. What else we got? An NAC Airlines. It's going back a bit. Rainwear, Rainster raincoats. Milo, it's still around. Champion stoves. Interesting papers. You can buy these in quite a number of libraries. They're still about. And here's photographs of when the Queen came. All the soldiers all standing at attention, the crowd with their Union Jacks and their Kiwi flags. There she is in all the glory. Cannons being fired and people dancing and soldiers marching. And here he is. There's old Sir Edmund Hillary and others conquering Mount Everest. I just wonder if the young people today even know this happened. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who knows? A couple of buildings all lit up around the place. And we go on, we've got the... Wow. But anyway, in this other copy I've got here, which was in 1947, and it features putting a fire out in a building in Christchurch. But what I wanted to show you in this one is Swift Meals. Here we go. Look at that. Invest in an Austin 8 and save petrol, save gas. Isn't it amazing? And Pan American Airways, they're advertising a sleepette, so you can stretch back in your seat and take it easy as you travel from A to B. Nugget shoe polish. Wow. So 1947, I was 1, but it's just a great way to look back at history through these New Zealand weekly newses. Now I'd like to introduce the first part of our episode, and it's about the Cord motor car. And I'd never heard of Cord when I was young. A few came here maybe, but I didn't know about them. But I first became aware of Cord when we were travelling the world, and we went into a few museums, and there was the Cord with its headlights that sort of mechanically opened up and down, and I just thought it was a very interesting and unusual car, way ahead of its time, and I've actually got one. We saw one the other day, so let's go and have a look at the Cord. Every now and then you come across something absolutely extraordinary, and this is one of those occasions. What we've got here is a 1937 812 Cord, C-O-R-D. I've seen a few of these cars in museums around the world, and I know there are a couple in New Zealand here. And a couple we've seen had pipes, or a pipe, maybe 2 pipes coming out of the side of the bonnet. And those versions were supercharged versions of the Cord. And I think Cord were way ahead of their time when they designed this car, in that, for instance, the headlights. And in the front of the mudguards, it's got these little slots, and behind there is the light. And in the cabin, they've got 2 little winders, one each side, so it works on a cable. So you wind the cable in the cab, and the little lights will open up, and down it goes. I'll see if I can actually get it to work. Shouldn't be too cars, so I'll just... And there it goes. And look at that, ready to head off. And when you finish the day, you just rewind it and it shuts it again. And there you go. tickety-boo. This didn't really happen until about 1964 when they had the lights into the mudguard. I think Chev did it. But it's a long time, since 1964 back to 1937 when they did this. This is a front-wheel drive car, and the French actually invented front-wheel drive, and Cord have taken it on board, and the reason they did that was so they could lower it. It wasn't so high, it was a low car. The average car in the 1930s was about 2 meters tall. But because they put front-wheel drive, it meant that they can lower it a wee bit, and it also doesn't have the hump in the through the middle to the, take the drive shafts through to the diffs at the back. But a stunning design. This bonnet is actually quite long, and because of the square shape of it, people thought it looked like a bit like a coffin, so they called it the coffin nose Cord. Let's have a look at the bonnet. That is a Lycoming engine, and Mr. Cord, in his wisdom, bought the Lycoming engine company. And Lycoming engines pretty much specialise in aeroplane engines, but they did make obviously car engines as well. And in America there were lots of engine makers. Waukesha were one of them, Lycoming. It's a V8. And probably one of the first V8s to come out. I think Ford might have been already making his V8, but I'm not sure on that one. But Chev didn't certainly start making V8s until the 50s. But in 1937, the Lycoming people made their V8. And another version you could get with this is that they could add a supercharger to it, which meant that there was a pipe coming out of the side. But that's absolutely stunning. Great big long horn, 2 horns each side, so I bet that sounds really, really good. The inside of this is all muffled, so I guess that's interesting. And it's also got an interesting radiator cap. That's really interesting. Not a radiator cap as we know it. The flute's on the side here, all the way back. Then we come to a suicide door, and everything in there is leather. The dashboard in this car is absolutely stunning. In fact, if you got into a 1940, 1939 Diamond C truck, the deluxe model, it had a dashboard very, very similar to this. There was a gauge for everything and lots of little switches and knobs and what have you. But anyway, that's it. The gear stick comes off the side of the steering column, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots that you can, just a little lever that pops into the slots. But we'll listen to that. We'll have a look at that gear stick and the tick. And then in the back, we open up the door, and it's got a strap to hang on to, plenty of leg room, and the way that this door's designed, there's enough room there to sort of swing your bum in this little gap and you're sitting in it. A stunning colour, and the windscreen is opened a wee bit so a bit of air can flow through to the passengers as you travel along. And they did this in the 1930s and 40s and even the 50s. I think it stopped in the maybe early 60s, but you don't see this these days where the windscreen can roll out and air can come in. So just looking at this dashboard, no power steering of course, so it's a reasonably sized wheel. And in the corner here we've got a winder, and there's a winder in that corner, and what that does, when you wind it, it opens up the headlights out the front. And when you finish with it, you wind it back the other way and they close again. So we've got a temperature gauge, oil filler gauge, the speed in miles, so it goes up to 120 miles an hour. Then you've got a rev counter. What's after that is a oil pressure, the next big gauge, and the last one is a clock. And then underneath that we've got a amp meter And as I said, there's a water temperature on this side. And then we come to these 4 little switches in the middle, which basically one's the choke, one's the gas, it says, one's lights, and the other one's an instrument lights. But this is the gear stick. And there's 4 little slots for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I guess over this side and up is reverse. And you've got to remember this is a front wheel drive, so all of that componentry is out the front, around the engine. So it's just, I haven't seen anything like this wheel, but it's a bit like the pre-selector they had in the old Daimler buses back in the day. Sort of put it in, and when you push the clutch it went into gear, and put it down for the next one, push the clutch, it goes into gear, and that might be how it actually worked. But anyway, if you look inside this car, leather seats, we've got an armrest that comes into the front, and even the headlining, if you can see it, the headlining is actually leather as well, going all the way back to that cute little double window, back window. And yeah, it's a well thought out car. The mudguards are like a lot of, like Diamond T, that was a truck and a half, and their mudguards are similar to this in that they sort of perfectly moulded, sitting on the side of the truck. I love these flutes that go down the side of the engine here, right around the front and back down the other side. But the windscreen, as I was saying, they open up. There's a couple of little air vents that put a bit of air underneath, so it's sort of flowing around your seat as you travel along. But this is the boot, and previous to this it just came down. I think it may have had a wheel sitting on the back, but a lot of people complained there was no boot space. So with the 37 they've included this boot, and there's a couple of clips here, really fancy clips to unlock it, and there's a little Cord logo there, and the same as the front bumper, it's got the little 3 rows of decoration, I suppose you call it, but and even the nuts are chromed on the inside. And over here it's got a little lockable fuel tank. The old Cord, this is just absolutely stunning. There's nothing I can say, it just blows you away. When you see this car you just go, wow, this has completely got the wow factor. What I've got here is a copy of Talking Trucks. This is a book I wrote a couple of years ago, and it's the history of New Zealand trucking, and it's all from the programs that I did between 2013 and 2016. I'm going to let this go for $25, so it's a special. So if you'd like your copy, there's my phone number, 027 277 0717, just send me a text, or email me, billhohepper@extra.co.nz to get your copy. $25 and the history of New Zealand trucks. On Saturday, November the 6th, we leave for another Bill Hohepper Old Truck Tour of New Zealand. We leave from Auckland and make our way to Wellington, cross over on the ferry to the South Island, and continue down all the way to Richardson's Museum in Invercargill. Then we travel up the coast all the way to Wakefield and on to Rockville. All this and looking at old trucks as we go, as well as seeing a fair bit of New Zealand. We have 12 places available and people will travel by minibus. So if you have an ex-truck driving dad or granddad or somebody you know, maybe this special trucking holiday treat will be just the ticket. Maybe a Father's Day surprise. If you'd like to find out more, just go to my Facebook page, Bill Hohepper's 2021 Old Truck Tour, and all the details are there. Or just email me at billhohepper@extra.co.nz. In 1946 and 47, thereabouts, 48, they brought a whole bunch of ex-military GMCs into the country, 6x6, 4x4. This has still got that same cab from that era, so this must be about 1949, 1950, maybe 51, but it's gone to this really elaborate GMC grille on the front of it, a bit like a Diamond T grill, all chrome and what have you on the front. So maybe GMC was trying to compete with Diamond T and others that were you know, making a bit more bling with their trucks. And there's a truck we all know and love, the old jail bar Ford, and looks like it was a fire truck tanker with a tanker on the back and a roll of hoses on the top of that again. But they even got those in America. Wow. And look at this, an R190 in America. Wow. Hidden amongst all these other trucks. And on the left hand side here is, you might remember we did a story in Christchurch where we looked at an Autocar that had been a wee bit bent, bonneted Autocar. Well, there's that same truck there, looking a lot better than the one we looked at. You can just see where the logo went above that grill, and that's a logging truck from yesterday. But just along here I can see the nose of a K-Series International sticking out. So amongst all these bonnets we're getting back into the 1940s as well, a bit like that jail bar Ford. But let's go along and have a look at this K-Series International. Look at this, a K-Series International, gone past its day. It's got a tank on the back, so it may have been part of the fire service. It's painted red, so who knows, but that's sitting there. And next door is an old Kenworth, still got the same doors as everything else of this era, but I'm just looking at the mudguards. The Kenworth with a mudguard like that, and I'm just wondering, have Diamond T, with all their style, got ahead of Kenworth with sales, and so Kenworth has decided, well, what are we going to do? And so, well, let's make the same sort of mudguard as everybody else. The Mac looked like this, Diamond T looked like this, and it's even got the headlights with a little, exactly the same as the Mac and the Diamond T, with a little side light sitting up on the top. And this Kenworth's got the old KW logo, big steel grille surround, and next door is another heavy duty Mac by the look of it. David Hull on the door, so it's been a dump truck in its time, and there's logging truck, this has been a logging truck, and that old International's been a tank carrier, and there's still a lot more trucks to look at here, so while we're here, let's make the most of it. I think I've discovered something. This is the Kenworth with the mudguards and on the mudguard light, and the doors and the windscreen, and this has got the same door, same windscreen, except we've now come to the fiberglass body. So we've gone from this to this, and so we've found the link now that joins this. The model after this, I suppose, is this one. And then of course they just modernise as they go up. And there are a couple of more models of Kenworth that we recognise, but just looking at the beginnings of Kenworth, looks like they came with mudguards and then went to this. But the doors, just like the doors that are on the Peterbilts and even the Autocar, they all got that narrowish looking window and a couple of strakes along the sides. Interesting. And there you go. I think I've found the evolution of Kenworth. One of the interesting things about American trucks these days is they're all bonneted. There's a few cab overs, but they seem to have gone out of making cab overs. But this cab over behind me here is a Freightliner, and we saw a Freightliner earlier, and I thought it was just the most intimidating vehicle on the road, and this is probably up there with it as well. It's all steel bars and louvers in the front, big white Freightliner. So Mr. White and Mr. Freightliner obviously have got together at some stage, and White's fallen off and it's just become Freightliner. But a cab over Freightliner, you don't see these in New Zealand. In fact, you don't see them anywhere except here. But let's have a look in the cab. It's got a decent sort of a step on it, I must say. This is the passenger side, of course, because the left-hand drive, but a little bit of a handle there. Yeah, swing yourself up into here, no worries. Well, it's certainly a wide cab, and right in front of me is the air cleaner. So if I was the passenger, I'd be putting my feet up on the air cleaner to relax a bit. And like the big Leylands, it's all full of engine between me and the passenger. I got in okay, so I suppose I can get out okay. So there's another big photograph of Billy Ho's bottom. And at the back of this Freightliner, you can just see there's the top of the bonnet goes above that, and there's the engine's tucked up in there. But in later times, of course, they've lifted the cab above that, so there's plenty of air to get across the top, but they hadn't thought of that at this stage. So there you go. I've seen photographs of these things, never thought I'd actually be sitting in one, so that's a bit off my bucket list. But a Freightliner, a really early model. Well, actually it's a white Freightliner, so white and Freightliner got joined up somewhere along the line, and white fell off, and Freightliners are still on the road today. In fact, I have to say there's probably more Freightliners on those motorways that we've been driving along than any other truck. Kenworth make a heavy duty truck, as we know. It's got the checker plate mudguards, and some of them have the mudguards that actually stand out, and they're for the logging and the rest of the heavy duty stuff. And the round town jobs just had the moulded fiberglass. But this is to me, looks like a very old Kenworth. It's even got a different logo on the front. It's actually got the whole word Kenworth in a circle on the front there. Steel mudguards. Still got the same door that looked like it was universal to all the trucks. Very narrow cab, that's for sure. Great big steering wheel, twin sticks, and lots of little dials and switches, as you would expect in a Kenworth. One little window in the back there to see who's coming along behind. It's got a big stanchion on the back there for the logs. So this too would have been a logger in its time, but even so, it's still got the little side lights attached, but it's on the side, but it's still attached to the headlight, which is on a little pedestal out the front there, covered with a piece of steel. Not sure what's in there, but probably a Cummins. But there it is, a real heavy duty early Kenworth. But just take a look at that little logo. That's completely different again. Here's another version of the big heavy duty Kenworth, except the logo on the front's changed. It's probably come forward a bit with just KW rather than the whole word. And the exhaust pipe comes up through the middle of the bonnet, but like the old Euclids. And it too hauled logs back in its time, but another great big heavy duty thing with a big steel casing around the headlight. Next door, I think this is the next shape up from the Autocar that we saw down in Christchurch, and the other one just along here a bit, because the cab has changed to what's on the white and on the Western Star. It's got that slightly wrapped round shape to the windscreen, same doors, except it says Autocar across the front here. It's got the louvers. Autocar actually had two come to New Zealand, I think. One of note, which is like this, exactly like this, went to the Aotearoa zigzag when they were making that pass that went from the west coast up to Arthur's Pass. They took away the zigzag and made it what it is today, the big bridge up the top there. But they had a short wheelbase one of these because it was the only thing that was strong enough, heavy enough and powerful enough to tow whatever it was around those little zigzags. But being the government, whatever you want, you get. So good to see another example of a Autocar, and as I was saying, it's just a bit flashier than the one we saw earlier that's in Christchurch, and I'm not quite sure what they had that for, but it came to New Zealand as well. Autocar diesel, it says there, California number plate.
I'd like to thank Casey Hull for giving us the opportunity to have a look around his collection of trucks. And I must say, they're all in an amazing state of repair, considering they've just been parked up where they stopped. The collection he has under cover is absolutely outstanding. So thanks Casey, it was fantastic. After the break, we're going to have a look at something completely different.
We've arrived in a place called McMinnville, which is in Oregon and not far from Portland, and we couldn't resist coming into this air museum, which has aeroplanes of all sorts and sizes and jets, and the space museum. But the highlight for me is the Spruce Goose. And the Spruce Goose was built about 1938 by Howard Hughes. And the idea of it was to transport soldiers from point A to point B, but it took so long to build. I think it was ready in 1947 or something, so the war's been and gone. But the whole thing's made of wood, and it is just enormous. You've got no idea. You have to be here to see this thing. So if you have any passion for aeroplanes, I think you should put this place on your bucket list. 1, 2, 3, 4 engines up there, 4 on the other side, and there is footage, and they tell me that this thing got off the ground by about 20 feet in a test flight and then came back down again. So it did fly, it did get off the water. It's a waterborne aircraft, so I think we should go and have a look inside. We're inside the Spruce Goose, and that's heading down towards the tail. And there's just wires and wire looms, and it's just engineering going on forever in here.
Engineer that sat over here, he had responsibility for making sure that all of 8 engines were at exactly the same RPM. Because Howard, in order to get it to lift off of that water drag, he had to go 94 miles an hour in order to get it to even lift. So those 2 guys in the day that it flew were really in tight communications.
I bet they were. I just see all these little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's not a great deal of room between each one.
Well, you know, when you run them, you control them all.
Oh, the whole lot. Oh, yeah.
That's
Well.
right.
Okay. Switches for Africa, dials for Africa.
Yeah.
Up the top. Yeah. So he must have been a really thrilled man on this day that he's going along and got it off the water a bit, knowing that he was, not allowed to.
Right. Right. He wasn't supposed to. Because of course, it was publicized, and so the newspapers had written about it, and the radio had talked about it. So everybody, all the looky-loos were out there in the bay in their boats, but they were roped off by the Coast Guard. They were only so much.
Yeah.
So he only had so much room to be able to take off and then set it back down again. So that's why he was only in the air for 59 seconds.
Wow. It must have been a day and a half for him. It's just sitting here with all this. It's all him. He's put the whole thing together, supervised the whole lot, and flown it. So that's a whole achievement, of his life just come together. Not many men get to do that. We've come up on this bit of a platform so we get a better view of the Spruce Goose, and I'd just like to explain the Spruce Goose. Apparently a reporter was making fun of the aeroplane and fun of Howard Hughes, and the name Spruce Goose came out with that report, and it basically stuck. But if you mentioned Spruce Goose around Howard Hughes, you got the sack. So it was either the Howard Hughes flying boat or Hercules. Those were the 2 names that you could use to describe this aeroplane. And it's not actually made of spruce, it's made of birch. So there you go. But the birch goose doesn't really sound right, does it? So the Spruce Goose fits, so that's what it is. But it's just an enormous aeroplane, and if you get a chance, it's a place called McMinnville, Oregon, just before you get to Portland, and put it on your bucket list. If you're anything to do with aeroplanes, you need to come and see this. It's a big thing.